This ugly list is what I use to make sure I start each new week cool, calm, and collected rather than like a scatterbrained mess. Let's have a look. It's about 10:15 on a Sunday morning and I've just gotten out of the shower, thus all of this, so it is a perfect time for a weekly reset. The weekly reset is effectively just a way for me to get my life in order, get myself cool, calm, and collected for the week ahead, making sure I know what I need to do, what's coming up, and getting my space in a way that actually reflects how I want my mind to look. As you can see, at the moment it is a bit of a mess, but the first step in my weekly reset is actually getting myself a nice drink and putting on a playlist. The playlist is going to be something upbeat, it gets me in the mood to get my reset done. Depending on the mood or kind of vibe you're going for with your reset, you might want to put on something a little bit more chill, a little bit more mellow, but I find that a more high energy playlist kind of amps me up for the process, so that's what I'm going to be using. I don't typically set a time limit for tidying up my desk, I just go until it's done, but it can be quite useful to time restrict yourself here. You know, when you go to put something in a drawer and then something else in the drawer distracts you, and then you find yourself sitting on the floor looking through 5 years worth of papers that you collected when you were a kid. I don't know, it really depends on what you have in your drawers, but we want to make your time use as effective as possible, so let's try not to get distracted. Set yourself a timer if you need to. Once the tidy up phase is finished though, it's time to go back to sitting at my desk so that we can do the next parts of the reset. Now as we've done the pre-reset stages, we can get into the initial stages or start of reset. This little flip out that I have at the front tells me the sequence of events. So we've done our drink and playlist putting on, which you can't hear right now because copyright and all of that. We have tidied the desk, it is looking much better, and now we're into doing an initial brain dump. Typically I would do the brain dump just in my everyday journal, but because I have perfectly mapped out how many pages I have left in this journal with the number of days left in the month, we're actually going to be using a separate notebook. This one's just a nice cheap notebook that I got at Kmart. Any kind of $2 shop notebook will do for this. It's just something that we don't mind being a little bit messy in so that we can write down all of the thoughts and feelings we have in our head and get them out onto paper. While for my desk tidying phase, I don't like to set a timer, I just like to let it take as long as it takes. For my brain dumping, I do like to have some kind of a time restriction. Otherwise, I will just let myself sit here for like half an hour or more, just trying to think up anything that I can put onto this page. Having a time restriction here really helps me stay focused and also means that I don't give in to the idea of having to have every single little thing in the book. Otherwise, I'll end up effectively giving myself mind strain from trying to get my thoughts out of my head. If you don't like the term brain dump, you can use something like a mind unwind or a mental inventory. The term doesn't matter so much, but the process does. We just want to get all of those thoughts and feelings out so that we can think about them more objectively. It can be kind of hard to prioritize things and assign them to different days of the week when you have them all just up in your head. So putting them out on paper can help us pick out the important ones, schedule them where they need to go, all of that kind of thing. This is also only the initial brain dumping stage. We are going to be adding more to this list as we go through other stages of the reset, but doing this brain dump first helps us kind of clear up some mental space so that we can tackle other parts of the reset. It's also good to note that anything that you want to put on your brain dump is totally fine to do. I effectively like to write it down even if it seems kind of small or trivial or silly, just because putting it down on the page feels like a little reward. Like, good job Jess, you had a thought, let's write it down on the paper. So for instance, something like inbox 0 that I've written on this list, I know that I'm actually going to be doing that as part of this reset process anyway. But if I start filtering myself for what I put on my brain dump, I'm gonna start thinking that things have to be big ticket items, or I'm only allowed to put the important stuff down on this list. That kind of restriction doesn't work well for me, so putting it down, even if it's little, that's something I like to do. Bringing my everyday journal back, you can see that the next task is to review my open tasks. To be honest, it's been a little while since I've done a proper reset process, so reviewing open tasks is going to take a while this time around. The more consistently you do this on a weekly basis, it won't be so much of an issue, but because I haven't been doing this review for a couple of weeks, it means that I have quite a few entries to go back through and make sure that I've reviewed those open tasks. Reviewing open tasks includes things like checking off the ones that have already been completed, crossing out the ones that are no longer relevant or were timely and the time has now passed, or maybe they're just not important anymore, and also pulling out the ones that still need to get done. Any of those ones that are still things that I deem important are going to get pulled out of this journal and onto the brain dump. Again, if you're doing the brain dump in the journal, then I guess it will stay in the journal. But for me this time around, with that separate brain dump, we're pulling it out into a separate space. This step you can time restrict, but I often just do it until it's complete. I want to make sure that I've gone through all of those open entries so that then it's effectively a fresh start for the new week. It's worth mentioning that there are quite a few blank entries in my previous daily logs. That's because at the end of last month I really wasn't using my journal as much as I possibly could have been. I've mentioned it in a couple of videos, but I'm kind of in a little bit of a journaling slump at the moment, so my use of my journals has been quite varied, and that also shows with the lack of completion of my weekly reset processes. But I know how helpful they can be in making it so I start the new week with a cool, calm and collected feeling, so I'm making a conscious effort to make sure I do a very good job of it this time around. Now as we've finished reviewing the open tasks, we're into what I consider to be the middle of the reset, and the stages here are to do an inbox 0, check my calendar, check my start of bullet journal pages, and check my yearly collections. While I go through the inbox 0 stage, I'm going to be keeping that brain dump space handy, just in case I come across any emails that might require me to do tasks. Whether that be to send a response or to organize something, really whatever it is, I'm going to want to write it down on that brain dump. I want the brain dump to be a catch-all for anything that I could possibly need to get done, including things in my digital spaces. While I do call this stage inbox 0, I very rarely delete all of the emails in my inbox. Some of them will get filtered into folders, some of them are going to need to be responded to, so I just leave them in the inbox with a little flag. But really it's just making sure I'm clearing out any of the clutter and stuff that isn't necessary and isn't important. For the checking my calendar step, this is going to be both in my bullet journal and on my digital calendar, but flipping back to my monthly log, here I'm really just seeing what has happened in the week past, is there anything I need to add, and what's coming up in the week ahead. I really want my monthly log to, at the end of using my journal, be an accurate reflection of what actually was happening for me. So going back and adding in any events that I might have missed, to me is equally important to adding ones that are coming up. I'll add in more formal events like appointments, going places, seeing people, that kind of stuff, and also ones that are a little bit more just for me, things like filming days or days where I'm doing specific things around the house, like laundry day. This just helps me make sure that I'm not overcommitting to stuff on any given day of the month. As part of this stage, I'll also message my friends to check any plans we have coming up and add any relevant tasks to my brain dump. At this stage, I don't have any events that do need checking in with, so our next step is to check my start of bullet journal pages. I like to have this on here because if you're anything like me, you might have a tendency to neglect your start of journal pages once you initially set them up. So just looking through all of these and adding anything I need to, checking off things, that kind of stuff. Depending on how many start of journal collections you have, you might have quite a bit to check in with or not very much at all. This is another step that I do prefer to set myself a time limit, just to make sure that I'm actually staying focused. As I'm going through these pages and filling in my collections, updating my trackers, I'm also making sure to pull out anything that could be a task that I can add to my brain dump. Some of the things that I have on here are stuff like my self-care bingo or my chores tracker, so any tasks related to those things I can put onto that brain dump to make sure that those things actually end up getting done. As mentioned, I do have a bit of an issue with remembering to come back and check in with my start of journal collections, so having this intentional step on the weekly reset just helps me to make sure that that actually happens, provided I am actually doing my weekly resets. This spread here is the end of my start of journal pages, which means we're on to the next task of checking in with my yearly collections. These ones are in a separate notebook because they're collections that are supposed to last me the entire year, so putting them in my everyday journal would mean that I'd have to transfer them with each new everyday journal that I set up. Typically I go through about 3 everyday journals in 1 year. This is another stage where I'll set myself a soft timer to keep myself focused, but really I'm just working through each of the pages in my yearly collections journal and making sure that they are up to date. So checking off things that have happened, filling in my trackers, that kind of thing. This is also another opportunity to add more ideas to that brain dump that we've been building. Effectively, the initial and middle stages of my reset process are all about just building up that brain dump. So making it a kind of one-stop shop for everything that needs to get done, so that in the next stage I can start to go through that and actually sort out what actually needs to be done this week, what's going to get done this month, so on and so forth. This time around, I didn't have anything that I wanted to pull out of my yearly collections journal, but often it'll be things like stuff on my 101 things list, which are 101 things that I want to accomplish in the year, those being both big and small goals, and also stuff off my future me problems or someday maybe list. These are tasks that I want to get done at some point, but they're not necessarily so pressing that they have to get done this month, this week, this quarter, anything like that. Once I finished filling in my yearly collections though, then we're moving into the end of the reset process. The first step from this is to organize my brain dump. So this is looking through all of those tasks that I added to the list and thinking about where they should actually go. Obviously there are a lot of tasks here, and adding them all to my daily task list, 1, isn't possible because I don't have enough space on it, and 2, would be a little bit silly because I'm not going to do all of these things today. Some of them are going to get done today, some of them are going to get done tomorrow or next week, and some of them are very much future me problems or someday maybe tasks. So I want to go through each of these entries and consider, 1, do I still want to keep them? If not, I can cross them off. For instance, in box 0, we've actually already finished this task, so I can cross it off as complete. Some tasks on this list are actually already captured elsewhere, and they don't need to be transferred at all. For instance, the task of putting printables in my shop, I already know that that's in my future me problems list, so I can just cross that one off. Doesn't actually need to be migrated anywhere. Something that I do to help myself sort this list out is color coding as I go. So here I'm highlighting all of the tasks that I know I want to do today, and then I can go through and consider all of the ones that I might want to do this week or this month, and then any of the ones that are left are future me problems or ones that don't need to get done at all. As part of this process, I do like to make sure that every single entry to the brain dump has been accounted for, so everyone has either a color code to tell me where it needs to go, or it's been crossed off because I don't need to do it. This just means that things don't get left behind, and I can be very sure that I am done with this brain dump after I do the next stage. Once the brain dump has been organized though, then it's time to actually migrate the brain dump, and we can put it in things like my everyday bullet journal, this guy, or my yearly collections, or anywhere else. So this could be things like my long-term collections journal, or maybe there's space online that I need to store this stuff. Really depends on the task. Anything that I've done in yellow though is a today task, and that stuff is going to go in here on my current daily log. As I go through, I'm going to check off that the tasks have been migrated on the brain dump, just so that I know that they have been dealt with. There may look like quite a few today tasks, but some of those are going to be quite quick, some of them will be a little bit longer, but I am hoping to get all of them done. If you're wondering about the general structure of my daily log that I'm using here, I do have a previous live stream video where we talked a bit more about it, but the yellow horizontal line that runs through the middle was actually a mistake. I've mainly just been ignoring it, but loosely the entries at the top are priorities, and the ones at the bottom are just other things that I want to get done. Now as all of the today dots have been dealt with, all of the ones in yellow, we then have the green ones, which are for this week. Now, notably, I'm not going to put them on my daily log because this is for today's tasks, but I would like to record them in my everyday journal so I have them to refer to as I work through my week. Now I do have spaces for each of my daily logs mapped out here, but I haven't actually set them up in terms of doing my every second line highlight or the top stuff, so I'm going to have to do that first. You may also be able to see that my back cover looks a little bit strange here, and that's because the back cover is actually coming off. Probably need to fix that. I should probably put that on my task list. A bit unfortunate, but considering this is going to be my last month in this journal, I'm really not too worried about it. Depending on whether you use daily logs or weekly logs, or a combination of both, you might want to make it so that setting up your next daily or weekly space is part of your weekly reset. This very much used to be a written out step in my weekly reset process, but now as I fluctuate between dailies or weeklies or a combination of the two, I don't write the step down just in case the structure of what I'm using changes. For this though, it's just the process of setting up my daily logs and then transferring tasks into the relevant days. If there are any of those green tasks from my brain dump that I'm not too sure which day of the week I want to put them on, I just put them on the first day that I think I'll reasonably be able to get to them. That way I'll have the task there waiting for me when I get to a time that I can actually work on it. For the tasks that are in purple, or the this month tasks, typically they would go on a monthly task list. I don't actually have one set up in my journal, but what I do have is a projects list in the front here. So what I can do is pull out the ones that are a little bit more project based and put them in here, or what I also could do is add them into my actions list for my goals, if they're related to goals in particular. So for instance, my meal menu mapping, that one is related to my goals, so I can put that on this list. This process though did re-highlight to me the need for a monthly task list. A lot of the time I feel like I don't need it because typically with my daily logs I just let them take up as much space as they want to rather than sectioning it out so that there is a day per page. But because I'm getting to the end of this notebook, I did want to have those spaces sectioned out ahead of time just to make sure that everything could fit. So possibly with my next monthly setup, I may include a monthly task list so that I have a space to put all of these kind of tasks. Anything in pink though is an eventually task, or a someday maybe task, or what I like to call a future me problem. These ones in particular are going to get moved into my future me problems list in my yearly collections journal. So just going through the brain dump, pulling out any of those tasks that have the pink dot beside them, and making sure that I turn the entry bullet into the migration arrow so that I know that it's been dealt with. Once the migration stage is done though, we are then into the post-reset tasks, the first of which is to retidy my space, which I don't actually need to do this time thankfully because I've kept myself fairly tidy, and then after that an enjoyable task. I usually keep this small, something that's gonna just give me a kind of instant dopamine kick. So for today I think I'm gonna go and watch some journaling videos that I have put off. And then I can get started on today's task list. If you are looking for more videos on the weekly reset, then the playlist at the top is for you. Or if it's getting towards the end of the month and you want to do a monthly reset instead, then the one at the bottom's worth checking out. Click or tap on either of those and I'll see you over there.